I want you to imagine, just for a second, that you're walking into a classical art museum.
Okay.
You step into one of those grand rooms, with the high ceilings and the hardwood floors, and you walk up to a famous 19th century Impressionist painting.
Right. Vibrant strokes, incredible light, all that.
Exactly. But when the tour guide steps up to explain the artwork to you, uh, it's not an art historian.
Oh.
Yeah, the guide doesn't care about, like, color palettes or the painter's troubled childhood or whatever. Instead, your guide is a modern clinical biomechanic.
Wow. Okay, so this guide is probably looking at what? Joint angles?
Right.
Like analyzing muscular load and spinal curvature and how kinetic energy is mapped out right there on the canvas.
Yeah, that is the exact lens we're looking through today. This deep dive is exploring a truly fascinating document.
Presented by Dr. Christophe Delong in Kinexa formation, right?
Right. It's titled Day 6, The Geometry of Effort. And it's part of a larger series they put together called 15 Days with the Impressionists.
Which is just such a cool concept.
It really is.
Yeah.
What Dr. Christophe Delong and Kinexa present here completely flips the script on how we view art. They're exploring phase 2 of their work, focused on the mastery of gesture.
Essentially treating these incredibly famous Impressionist masterpieces as early involuntary motion capture studies.
Which is wild to think about.
But it makes perfect sense when you realize what these artists were trying to do. I mean, the Impressionists were obsessed with capturing reality in the moment, real people doing real labor in real light.
Right.
And by observing the human body so intensely, they inadvertently captured the deep truths of biomechanics, like a full century before we had digital sensors or 3D mapping software to actually measure it.
So we're going to be talking a lot about the posterior kinetic chain today. For you listening, think of this as the entire interconnected network of muscles, tendons, and ligaments that run down the back of your body.
Yeah, from the base of your skull, down your spine, through your glutes and hamstrings, all the way down to your Achilles tendon.
Exactly. It is the powerhouse of human movement. And the premise here is that these 19th century painters managed to capture the aesthetics of this muscle network in tension. But I want to get the mechanics out of the way first.
Sure.
How is Kinexa actually doing this? Like, how do you take a flat, two-dimensional painting and turn it into actionable clinical data?
Well, it comes down to extracting geometric data from the artwork. Kinexa isn't just looking at the mood of the piece, you know?
Right.
They are literally calculating the joint angles painted by the artist, isolating the degree of the lumbar curve, the exact tilt of the pelvis.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, the angle of the shoulder extension. And then they take those extracted painted angles and run them against modern 3D biomechanical models.
So they're testing the physics of the painting itself.
Exactly. If a worker is holding a certain posture, Kinexa calculates whether that posture is mechanically sound, like what muscles would have to be firing to prevent the person from falling over, and where the peak stress is located.
They were essentially retrofitting sports science onto 19th century manual labor. That's amazing. Let's look at the first piece of visual evidence, because this really cements the concept.
Yeah, let's dive in.
We're looking at Gustave Cailbaut's painting from 1875, The Floor Scrapers. You have 3 shirtless workers kneeling on a hardwood floor, bent completely over. They're scraping the varnish off the wood by hand. The perspective plunges downward, and this stark raking daylight comes across their backs, highlighting, like, every single muscle.
Cailbaut gives us an absolute masterclass in static symmetry here. When you map the biomechanics of these floor scrapers, you're seeing a body holding an extreme state of lumbar flexion.
Meaning their lower backs are completely rounded forward.
Right, but to actually scrape the floor, they have to push with full extension of their arms. This creates a massive conflict for the body. Gravity wants to pull their torsos flat against the ground.
But they don't fall.
No, because their posterior chain is acting like a complex suspension bridge. It keeps them suspended just inches above the floor while they generate forward force.
You know, this reminds me of watching an elite powerlifter set up for a deadlift.
Oh, that's a great analogy.
Right. Because if you look at a weightlifter, the moment before they pull like 500 pounds off the floor, there is this deep muscular symmetry.
Yep.
Every fiber along the spine is locked in, the lats are flared, the erectors are tight.
Yep.
It requires absolute surgical precision of a technical gesture, because if one side fires unevenly, the spine takes all the damage. The floor scrapers are exhibiting that exact same architectural effort.
The deadlift analogy is really useful for visualizing the tension, but there's a crucial biomechanical difference we have to consider here.
What's that?
Well, a powerlifter holds that maximum isometric tension for maybe 3 to 5 seconds. They lock in, lift, and drop the weight. These scrapers are holding this position for hours.
Oh, right. Wow.
The mechanics change completely when time becomes the dominant factor. To maintain that deep muscular symmetry over a 10-hour workday, the nervous system has to constantly recruit different microfibers within the back muscles.
Just to prevent total failure.
Exactly, and that is what Kinexa is measuring. They analyze this painting to quantify that exact muscular symmetry and movement quality.
So they're taking K-Bot's brilliant intuition about how the human body balances itself under extreme, sustained tension and applying it to modern physical therapy.
Yes. If a modern patient comes in with a repetitive strain injury, a clinician can look at these baseline models of how the body naturally organizes itself to distribute long-term isometric loads.
Wow, so the precision of the scraping gesture basically becomes a blueprint.
Right. If we know exactly how the human frame is supposed to align itself to handle this kind of horizontal force without collapsing, we can use that geometry for neuromotor rehabilitation. We teach the modern patient's nervous system how to fire those posterior muscles in perfect symmetry again.
That's incredible. Okay, so we've seen how the body handles perfect static symmetry. But life and, well, labor rarely allow you to just sit in one place pushing forward.
Very true.
Eventually, the body has to move, which introduces a totally different mechanical challenge. This brings us out of the Parisian apartment and deep into the fields.
Shifting from static tension to dynamic endurance.
Exactly. We are looking at Camille Pizarro's The Harvesters. Aesthetically, it's a huge departure. The sharp surgical light of Caillebotte is replaced by this vibrant, almost overwhelming Impressionist sunlight.
Yeah, the whole mood shifts.
The subjects are peasants, bent over in the fields, harvesting wheat by hand. From a biomechanical perspective, they are in a deep trunk flexion, just like the floor scrapers. But they aren't anchored to a floor.
Right, they are on their feet, moving forward, constantly bending and reaching.
So what's happening mechanically there?
This is where we see the body under a repetitive cyclic load. When you are standing but bent over at the waist for hours, your lower limbs become your only anchor against gravity. The hamstrings running down the back of the legs are absolutely screaming.
Just acting as the primary brake to stop the upper body from tumbling forward.
Exactly. The spinal erectors are firing relentlessly just to keep the spine from snapping, and the deep hip stabilizers are firing with every single step so the worker doesn't tip over while reaching side to side.
Okay, I have to push back here for a second.
Sure.
Because when I look at this painting, I don't see an elegant biomechanical system. I see pure, unadulterated backbreaking misery. These people are bent over in a field, doing brutal manual labor.
It definitely is brutal.
Right, so are we sure we aren't just projecting 21st century sports science onto 19th century exhaustion? Like, is Pizarro really painting a natural endurance protocol, or is he just painting peasants who are in pain?
It's a very fair challenge. It really is. But the biomechanical genius here isn't found in a single isolated worker. It's found in the group dynamic.
What do you mean?
If you isolate one harvester, yes, it's just an agonizing mechanical disadvantage. But Pizarro paints them moving together in a distinct rhythm. The way they swing the scythe, step, and swing again creates a natural synchronization.
Oh, interesting.
And clinically speaking, that rhythm is a survival mechanism.
Because it forces a cadence.
Because rhythm helps the central nervous system manage localized muscle fatigue. Think of a rowing team.
Okay.
If 8 people are rowing out of sync, the boat drags and everyone exhausts themselves fighting the water. But when they sync up, momentum carries them through the dead spots of the stroke.
I see where you're going with this.
For these harvesters, falling into a shared rhythmic cadence allows the body to bypass the conscious perception of pain for a little while. The movement schema becomes automatic. The kinetic chain learns exactly when to contract and when to relax for a fraction of a second during the swing.
Which is how you stretch limited muscular energy over a 12-hour day.
Exactly.
And Kinexa is looking at this to measure resistance to postural fatigue. They are analyzing how the body creates efficient motor schemas when it's under a prolonged, repetitive load.
Right. The goal isn't just measuring peak strength, it's measuring how long a specific posture can be maintained before the kinetic chain breaks down and injury occurs.
Because endurance in this context is completely disconnected from cardiovascular fitness, isn't it? We aren't talking about heart rate.
Not at all. We are talking about postural endurance. Can your lumbar spine survive the day? When working the land, flexion and support become the ultimate stress test for the posterior muscular chain.
So Kinexa uses these rhythmic repetitive load models to help modern workers or athletes understand how to pace a physical movement so their postural muscles don't fail before their lungs do.
Spot on.
Okay, so we have the static, isometric hold of the floor scrapers and the rhythmic, repetitive grind of the harvesters. Both of those are essentially about the body absorbing or resisting force. But what happens when the mechanics flip?
When we need to generate force.
Right. What happens when the human frame needs to generate an explosive dynamic release of energy outward into the world?
We move from surviving gravity to actively projecting force. And visually, there is no better representation of this than Jean-François Millet's The Sower.
Yes. Even though Millet was a precursor who deeply influenced the Impressionists, especially Pissarro. By the way, this piece stands in a category of its own.
It really does.
It features this striking, backlit silhouette of a worker striding across a dark field. He's taking a massive, wide step forward, and his right arm is thrown violently forward to scatter seeds across the soil.
We're looking at the biomechanics of a total gesture here. The energy doesn't stay trapped in the torso. It travels through the entire system and explodes outward.
You know, this instantly makes me think of a Major League Baseball pitcher winding up for a fastball.
Oh, absolutely.
When you watch a pitcher throw 95 miles an hour, you realize very quickly that the arm is basically just the end of a whip. The actual power has nothing to do with the shoulder itself.
Nope.
It starts when the pitcher plants their back foot, drives that kinetic energy up through the legs, violently rotates their midsection, and lets the arm just go along for the ride to snap the ball forward. Looking at the sower, I see that exact same whip effect.
Your pitcher analogy is mechanically flawless for what is happening here. Dr. Christophe Delong and Kinexa focus heavily on the concept of thoracic rotation.
The deep twisting of the mid-spine.
Right, because if you try to scatter seeds across a 20-foot radius using only the muscles in your shoulder, you will tear your rotator cuff in 10 minutes. The power has to originate in the core.
Walk us through the actual sequence of that kinetic chain. Like, how does the sower get the energy from the dirt to his hand?
Well, it requires a highly sophisticated sequence of muscular firing. First, the sower plants that wide forward stride, rounding the lower body. That creates a stable base.
Okay.
Then, he actively twists his rib cage. This fires up the obliques on the sides of his abdomen and engages the latissimus dorsi. Those are those massive wing-like muscles in the middle of the back. By twisting his spine backward, he is winding up the kinetic spring.
Wow.
When he releases, the torso snaps forward, pulling the shoulder girdle with it, and the arm is whipped forward as the final release valve for all that rotational torque.
And timing is everything, right? I mean, if any one of those segments fires a fraction of a second too early or too late, the power bleeds out.
Completely. If the hips open before the foot plants, the energy dissipates right into the ground. If the arm moves before the spine rotates...
You lose the whip effect entirely.
Exactly. And Kinexa utilizes this exact model of the sower to evaluate the rotary mobility of the trunk in modern clinical patients. They study this to understand coordination during projection gestures.
Which is vital for any athlete who throws, swings a golf club, or hits a tennis ball. Kinexa maps the mechanics of the spine in action to see how efficiently force transfers from the foot up through a rotating spine and out through the hand.
Yeah.
The sower is just the ultimate expression of a beautifully balanced, intentional projection of energy. The body is doing exactly what it was designed to do in perfect mechanical harmony.
It is an idealized biomechanical state, but as we both know, the real world rarely allows us to operate in perfect mechanical harmony.
Right. We don't always get to project energy outward in a perfectly balanced arc. Most of the time, life forces us to pick up awkward, unbalanced burdens.
Yeah.
And when gravity pulls us off center, that perfect kinetic chain starts to degrade, which takes us to our fourth and final piece.
We are moving into Edgar Degas's territory now, with laundresses carrying linen. Degas is widely recognized for having a clinical eye. He didn't romanticize movement, he painted the gritty reality of it.
And the gritty reality here is asymmetrical load. We are looking at women carrying massive, overflowing baskets of wet laundry. Unlike the floor scrapers who were perfectly centered over their work, or the sower who fluidly transferred weight from back to front, these laundresses are dealing with a dead, heavy, awkward weight, pulling them completely off balance.
This changes the physics of the body entirely. We are no longer talking about projecting force. We are talking about a desperate battle to shift the center of gravity.
You can see it clearly in how they are standing. Their arms are stretched out in front of them, holding the baskets, but their backs are noticeably leaning backward.
Yep.
It's exactly what you do when you pick up a heavy cardboard box that's packed terribly. If you hold it out in front of you, the weight acts like a lever trying to pull you flat on your face. So you instinctively lean back to counter the weight.
That lever analogy hits the nail on the head. The longue basket is a weight at the end of a lever, the arms being the lever, and the hips act as the fulcrum. To stop the lever from tipping the fulcrum over, the body has to provide a massive counterweight. It forces a radical adjustment of the lumbar posture. The woman has to hyperextend her lower back, curving it backward, while simultaneously pulling her shoulder blades as far back as they will go.
The physical toll of that has to be brutal. What muscles are taking the brunt of that compensation?
The trapezius muscles in the upper back and neck are screaming under that kind of isometric strain. But the real danger is in the deep stabilizers along the spine.
Why is that?
Well, these tiny muscles are not designed to carry primary loads. They are designed for fine-tuning balance. But because the massive asymmetrical load is pulling the spine out of its natural neutral alignment, those tiny stabilizers are forced to work overtime just to hold the vertebrae together. The body is in a perpetual, static, grinding battle against gravity.
This feels incredibly relevant to Kinexa's mission. Kinexa looks at Degas' clinical observation here to map the exact displacement of the center of gravity. They quantify how the body biologically adapts to front-loaded, unbalanced weight.
Because in a clinical setting, seeing how the body adapts is how you prevent catastrophic injury. The body is incredibly clever, you know. It will always find a way to complete a task.
Right, if you ask it to carry a heavy basket, it will get it done.
Exactly. But it will compromise your spinal health to do it. It will adopt harmful compensations.
It's a physiological trade-off. The clinical question Kinexa is asking when they look at this painting is, yes, the body adapts, but at what cost? You manage to get the heavy, wet laundry to the table, but you micro-tore your trapezius and compressed 3 lumbar discs in the process.
Yeah, and understanding that compensatory geometry allows physical therapists to intervene before a bad postural habit becomes a blown disc.
That is the whole point of studying these works. We have journeyed through 4 distinct stages of human biomechanical effort, all governed by the posterior chain, as presented by Dr. Christophe Delong, and Kinexa formation.
It is a brilliantly structured progression.
It really is. We started with Caillebott's floor scrapers, mapping the architecture of maximal extension and deep muscular symmetry.
Then we analyzed Pizarro's harvesters to understand deep trunk flexion and how neurological rhythm helps the body survive repetitive postural endurance.
From there, we looked at Millet's Sower to break down the explosive kinetic whip of thoracic rotation and balanced energy projection.
And finally, we ended with Degas' laundresses, confronting the stark reality of asymmetrical load, center of gravity shifts, and the high cost of bodily compensation.
The real takeaway here, and the ultimate value of what Kinexa is doing, is showing us that art and science aren't actually opposed. The jaw-dropping precision of a 19th century artist's eye can be seamlessly translated into actionable clinical data today.
Kinexa is taking oil paint on canvas and using it to measure modern fatigue, correct dangerous postural adaptations, and help people heal.
And I want to tie this directly back to you listening right now.
Because you do this every single day.
Exactly. The next time you grab a heavy grocery bag with one hand and lean backward to keep your balance, or you spend your Saturday repeatedly bending over to weed the garden, or you engage your core to throw a tennis ball across the park for your dog.
You are executing the exact same geometry of effort that these masters captured.
Your posterior chain is lighting up, your deep stabilizers are fighting gravity, and your nervous system is calculating joint angles in real time. You are walking around as a living, breathing canvas of biomechanics.
Which leaves us with a rather profound question to consider. The Impressionists captured the biomechanical truths of their era by observing the daily, repetitive labor of the 1800s. You know, the scraping, the harvesting, the carrying. But labor has changed.
It has. Most of us aren't carrying wet linen or swinging scythes anymore.
Right. So think about your own daily labor. When you are slouched over a laptop for 8 hours, or constantly craning your neck downward to look at a phone, or commuting with a heavy bag slung over a single shoulder. Wait, no, I shouldn't trail off. What invisible compensations are you forcing your posterior chain to make?
Oh, that's a great point. If a brilliant artist or a modern clinical biomechanic from Kinexa were to freeze your posture in a painting right now, what modern mechanical breakdown would they see?
And most importantly, what is the cost of that adaptation?
Next time you walk into a classical art museum, maybe you won't just look at the brushstrokes. Maybe you'll see the exact blueprint of your own daily movement looking right back at you. We'll leave you with that to chew on.